Hi, my name is John Beck, Esri Director of Law Enforcement Solutions. Welcome to today's webinar, Racial and Identity Profiling Act Data Collection with Survey123. We have a special guest host today, and I'd like to start off by introducing her. Amy, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, John. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Amy Varela, and I am the current chapter president for the Inland Empire Crime and Intelligence Analysts Association. I'm also a crime analyst with the Redlands Police Department here in Southern California. I'd like to thank Esri and Sgt Steve Rago with the Berkeley Police Department for partnering with our association and bringing our members, fellow crime analysts, and the various law enforcement attendees this great training. I'd now like to introduce Sgt Steve Rago with the Berkeley Police Department.
Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Rago. I'm a sergeant with the Berkeley Police Department. I've been with our department for 26 years, and I'm currently the supervisor of our police technology units. And it's my pleasure to be here this morning. John.
Thanks, Sergeant Rago. We are also joined today by Jason Latosky, who has been working with Berkeley PD on their survey, and he's going to help us out a bit later on in the webinar. Let's start by taking a look at the agenda for today. We're going to start with an overview of RIPA and why it's important not only in California, but also nationally. Though most states don't yet have mandatory stop reporting, it could be coming in the near future, so we thought it was a good information to share at the national level. Sergeant Rago is going to help us with an overview of RIPA at Berkeley PD and give us some background about Berkeley, how they're collecting the data, how they've rolled out the Survey123 app at their agency. He's then going to show us a demo of the app before we turn it over to Jason, who's going to share with us how this data then feeds into Arcgis dashboards for review and could also then be shared up to the state and reported to the state Department of Justice. Then he's going to give it back to me, and I'm going to discuss how it can also feed into the Esri Police Transparency Hub site. We're going to wrap up with some next steps to get you started and some Q&A. During the webinar, you can feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll answer as many as we can during the webinar. That's it for the agenda. Let's turn it over to Sergeant Rago. Sarge, take it away. I think I gave you control.
Great. Thank you, John, so much. Perfect. So what is RIPA? So RIPA stands for the Racial Identity and Profiling Act of 2015, and this was passed by the California State Legislature in order to standardize stop data collection across all agencies in California. Now, why is this important? Well, I think today most organizations and most communities sort of crave data. They crave data to analyze, use of force data, calls for service crime data. This is something that's very prevalent in our communities today. And so the natural progression is that stop data is going to be widely analyzed and used by many people and organizations. And what the statute does is it standardizes and allows all agencies to collect the same data and to provide the same data to the California Department of Justice. Now, to give you some background on what Berkeley PD has been doing, implementation timeline. So what the statute does is it's rolling in our implementation across the state in order of agency size. So the largest agencies have already begun implementation. So the California Highway Patrol, some of the larger police departments and sheriff's departments have already been doing this for several years or so. Now, Berkeley is in the Wave 4 classification based upon our size, which is what the majority of agencies are looking to do starting on January 1st, 2022. However, based upon our situation and the fact that we've been collecting data for some time, we decided to be an early adopter into Wave 3, which we started collecting data as of January 1st. We actually went live locally in our department on October 1st. But we'll begin reporting to the California DOJ beginning on January 1st of next year. Now, this is nothing new for us in the city of Berkeley and Berkeley Police Department. We've actually been collecting stop data since 1996. And as I mentioned, our community has a lot of interest in our stop data. We do publish our stop data, both in its old form and in our current form with the RIPA statute to our monthly, in a monthly basis to our open data portal. But we used to do it by a CAD disposition in our computer-aided dispatch system, which the officers would type in. But the problem with the way we were doing is we were too limited in our options. So we only collected 6 data elements, and they were very limited. Like, we didn't have the exact age. We only collected an age range, the enforcement, and things that the officers do as a result of the contact were not as deep as we could have, and they didn't provide much context to the stuff. So going live with the RIPA statute was a great thing for us, because basically we're increasing the number of data elements that we'll be tracking. Now, traditionally, as we have been doing, most agencies, if they do collect stop data, traditionally do it for vehicle and pedestrian stops. But what this statute is going to do is it's going to expand the types of stops that law enforcement agencies are required to report on. So they're expanding that to include basically any detention and any search of any person, regardless of whether or not the person was detained. So this will be a new training point for agencies to implement when they go live with this statute. Now, what kind of data is going to be collected? Well, first of all, there's going to be information about the reporting officer who's making the stop, the agency they work for, a unique identifier that will go along with the survey. They want to know the types of the officer's assignment and the years of service. But they also have information about the stop, so date, time, duration of call, the type of call for service. Was it at a school? Was the person stopped a student or not? And then data about the person who was stopped, the perceived race or ethnicity, perceived age, perceived gender, perceived LGBT, perceived known disability. All of these things are going to be based upon the perception of the officer who's making the stop and had the primary contact with the person who was detained. In addition, there's going to be information about the reason for the stop. If it was a traffic violation or some type of penal code violation, the officers need to document what that was, whether or not it was reasonable suspicion, a parole violation, or even a consensual encounter that led to a search. In addition, the statute is going to allow officers to list the actions taken as a result of the stop, such as, was there a search? And if there was a search, was any property seized? And if property seized, what type of property was seized? And lastly, there's going to be the result of the stop, whether or not there was any action taken, was a warning given, a citation. There are many different boxes that the officers can choose based upon the result of the stop and what happened at the end. So you can see it from even Berkeley PD standpoint, when we're originally capturing just 6 data elements, this statute is going to require over 20 and sometimes more depending on the type of stop. Because obviously if you have situations where you're searched, that's going to lead to additional data elements being collected. Now, all of this means that agencies are going to have to find a solution for collecting all of this stop data, since the majority of agencies are going to have to go live on January 1st of 2022. So our solution, which we came to here, was to use the Survey123 app. All of our officers here at Berkeley PD are issued iPhones, and the Survey123 app is iOS, can be iOS based. It took our IT people about 4 months to develop this survey. And what we did was we decided to roll this out to a pilot test group. So we have 7 patrol teams. Each team has about 12 officers on it. We did some training to our pilot test group. We gave them, the facts of the statute, when they need to collect it and everything. Of course, as most agencies have, cops don't exactly like to do new things, right? But the pilot group did really, really well. The feedback was very good. And so we decided to use the Survey123 as an app department-wide. And as I mentioned, we did go live with this as of October 1st, 2020. So now I'm going to transition into a demo. I'm going to show you our Survey123 app here in Berkeley, give you an idea of what our officers use on a daily basis. First off, I just want to give you a glimpse of the stop data collection form, which is what the DOJ provides us. This is a 4-page PDF, and it actually lists all of the data elements in this PDF. And as you can see over here, it's broken down by sections. So when I was mentioning the data elements before in the presentation, section 1 has to do with the officer, section 2 has to do with the date, time, location, and then it follows through to the perception of the person stopped, followed by the reason, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a 4-page document that collects all of this information. So our thought was to take all of this and to put it into a Survey123 app so that our officers can quickly go through and at the minimum amount of errors possible, which would then collect all of this data here. Now, I'm running this Survey123 app on a Windows PC, but like I mentioned, we do have iPhones for all of our officers, and they exclusively use the iPhones, and it works very, very well for them. So I'm going to run through our version of our Survey123 app right here. And one thing we did was we incorporated the sections on the survey over here to correspond to the sections that are on the stop data collection form. So section 1 here is our officer information, and we tried to leverage the features of Survey to either default fields when we can to help the officer speed through it. We also used logic to incorporate fields the officers didn't need to see. We would hide fields. So it sort of walked the officer through the fields they needed to fill out based upon the type of stop that they did. So we put a feature in here that designated the officer's years experience automatically. We thought that was important to do. These drop-down fields indicate that the data elements that the DOJ is asking for, we just defaulted it to patrol since that's the majority of our officers do that, but they can make the changes here as well. The second section has to do with the date and time. We just defaulted to the date, time, and location. The red asterisks here indicate it's a mandatory field. So duration of the stop in minutes is another data element. Was the stop made in response to a call for service? And all of these are based upon the statute. Was this an information-based stop? I will mention here that we decided to actually insert Berkeley-only specific questions into our survey. We do have 4 of them, and these are questions that we are going to use locally within our department to provide context to our local stakeholders. However, we're not reporting these to DOJ, and this is the first of these 4 questions. An information-based stop to us means when the officer made this stop, did they go upon some type of intelligence like a bulletin or a notice or a wanted flyer or something like that? What did that incorporate into their thoughts when they made the stop? So we thought that was important to collect, so we inserted this question right here. Another question that we have customized to Berkeley is the type of stop. We just wanted to know whether or not it was a vehicle, bicycle, pedestrian, so we inserted that right here. Now for the location, one thing we did to help the officers was we inserted this tool here that reverse geocodes the officer's location. So all they have to do is click the map, and it will default to their location, but you can also move the map and drop a pin, and it will then reverse geocode the officer's location and format it in the correct format as to what the DOJ wants. So as opposed to the exact address, this rounds it back to the 1900 block of Rose Street. We defaulted the city to Berkeley, but if they need to, they can change this to whatever city they're in if they're not in Berkeley. Whether or not it was a K-12 school is a yes or a no. But as you can see, we inserted logic in here. So if it was a school, we provided a list of Berkeley schools, and they can provide the name in here, which would be required if it was at a Berkeley school. Now, person information, this is section number 3, which I will show you down here on the left-hand side as well. Here's another Berkeley-specific question. Was the race or ethnicity perceived prior to stop? We felt this question was important for us because there could be situations where an officer is making a stop but they could not perceive the person prior to the stop. So say, for instance, the officer is working a night shift, or say it's a big panel van, there's no way they can see the person inside when they made a traffic violation stop. This provides context to that so we can say how many times the officers did make stops, but they couldn't see the person prior to making the stop. Proceeding down here, these are, per the statute, these check boxes. You are able to multi-check box for multiracial, perceived gender, and all of these boxes here are per the statute, and they're all based upon the officer's perception. Same with the limited or no English fluency, perceived or known disability. Now, for another Berkeley-specific question, what we wanted to do was we wanted to get an idea of the type of stops that were happening to people who resided within our city. So our officers designate to the city of residence to the person they have stopped. Now, by default, we do put Berkeley, but they can easily change it to a different city. And then we use these boxes here to sort of narrow down in the drop boxes what counties they're in, and we have lists of cities they can choose from. And that provides context to where the person was, since many people come through our city for various reasons, and we do have a university in our town. Section 4 has to do with the reason for the stop. Now, these are the available reasons that the officers have to check, and based upon the reason that they check, it may involve opening up other fields. For instance, if they check it was a traffic violation stop, that opens up a field down here to indicate the type of traffic violation that they did or that they witnessed. So if it was a moving violation, it opens up to the vehicle code section, and they can type in a vehicle code section, which they can either search for the number or some type of word in the description of the statute, and then they can select it. And these are required per the statute as well. You have to say the reasons why they made the traffic violation stop. And that takes us down to this field here, and it's called reason for stop, a brief description. This is a free form field that the DAJ asks that the officers provide a brief of the reason they stop. And it could be something like a traffic violation or red light violation, something like that. But because this field here is a free form field, we have to make sure our officers understand not to enter anything that's personally identifying information regarding the person stopped. So we commonly refer to that as PII. But these surveys are meant to be anonymous. They're not to be identifying. So we should not be putting names in here or identifying numbers. It should be a brief description only. So in fields that are not controlled by a drop-down menu, we need to make sure that we have quality review at the end of the month, just to ensure officers didn't put something in these fields that they weren't supposed to put in. And then section 5 has to do with the actions taken during the stop. Now, the officers can check multiple boxes as certain things happen. All of these are options, and you can select multiple things within here. If the officers performed a search of the person, you'll see that opens up another set of fields down here, which says, okay, if you made a search, what was the basis for the search? Was there consent given? Was it a search warrant? Was there suspected weapons? So these fields are only shown if this box is checked for the search. And this brings us to another free-form search description box right here. So if the officers did do a search, they need to provide a brief description of the reason why they searched. And again, this is a field that needs to be reviewed for any PII at the end of the month, since it is a free-form field that they can type information into. The next section here, we have contraband evidence. Any type of contraband evidence to seize can be identified by a check mark here. And then the result of the stop. And again, this is something that can have multiple check boxes in here. If the officers took no action, they just check this. If they ended up giving a citation in the field, that reveals another section down here, similar to the one that you saw for the reason for the stop. But if the officer stopped for one thing, but they issued a citation for something else, they would use the reference here to identify which statutes that they actually did. Just down at the survey. So down at the bottom, we do have the ability to add a second person onto one survey. So by hitting this plus sign here, what it does is it basically starts the officer back at section number 3, because you are able to submit one survey for multiple people. So since there's no reason to re-enter all this information up here, it automatically just defaults that information to what you entered the first time, and it takes you back up to here, and you can continue with entering a second person within the saved survey. Now, when the officers are done, they just come down, they click the checkbox, Now, I click the checkbox here. It does do a quick error check to make sure that the officers entered all the information. It won't let them submit the survey unless all mandatory fields have a value in them. And then once they do that, they are able to successfully submit the survey. So that's what our survey looks like. Let me transition back to our presentation. Perfect. So right now, our process here at the Berkeley Police Department is the officers are submitting surveys. We typically train them to do it at the time of the stop if they can, but they can do it later on if the circumstances dictate that they need to do it later on. They would simply do it later on in their shift. But for a monthly review and quality assurance program, we do have a system in place right now. We do review all of the free-form fields for any PII. We do make sure that all locations are accurate. Sometimes the officers drop the pin in the wrong place, or they'll drop the pin, but then they'll retype over the field location. We need to make sure that matches. But we do go through and we do some quality assurance review every month. And then at that point, we do publish locally to our open data portal here in Berkeley, and then we are testing right now the process for submitting to the state. But like I mentioned, we won't start doing that until January 1st of the new year. Now, the survey 123 from the officer standpoint, our feedback has been very, very positive. The staff likes it. The community right now has had very positive feedback as far as the data they're seeing online. I think the biggest part of the officer standpoint was we needed a solution that worked well, it worked fast, and it was easy for them to use. And those are all things that Survey 123 provides for our officers. All right, that concludes my demo. I think from here I'm going to hand it off to Jason, who's going to talk about some of the data dashboards and analytics behind the scenes.
Thank you, Sgt Rago, for walking us through Berkeley's Survey 123 RIPA form, which is really setting this foundation for the RIPA data collection solution that we're talking about here today. At this point, I'd like to take a little bit of time now to cover how using Arcgis as your system of record for RIPA collection really creates this steel thread for the information collected in the field. That steel thread really is allowing the information collected to flow directly into any number of the Arcgis applications here. This opens up capabilities to handle additional tasks such as reviewing that information, getting the data ready for submission to California DOJ, along with visualizing that information as well that's collected to aid in data-driven police decision making. So as Sgt Rago walked us through here, the RIPA data collection is being served through Arcgis Survey 123, really enabling that quick data collection. It says utilizing that form-based technology in that digital format. As we talk about the idea of then reviewing that information, we're going to go into a bit of a demo here in just a moment, walking through a web app application and web app builder application for PII editing capabilities, along with utilizing that information in a dashboard for, again, that idea for data-driven police decision making. But also how we can then manage that information to submit to California DOJ. That'd be utilizing Arcgis Pro and data interop capabilities to load that information to your secure FTP site that the California DOJ is supplying for you, but then also how we engage with our citizens and then leveraging our solutions to do such thing utilizing the Police Transparency Hub technology. So all of that within our system of record of Arcgis really, again, opens up that capabilities for individuals at the agencies to then keep that information free-flowing throughout the Arcgis system of record so that any one of those capabilities can be leveraged at any given time to aid in that idea of keeping the information current, available, and in near real time for possibly that, again, the data-driven police decision making. Let's roll into a little bit of a demo of what that kind of looks like and how to expand that idea of using Survey 123 and the Arcgis system of record for RIPA collection. We're going to cover here a PII editor using Web App Builder, along with a dashboard having that information flow directly into for either, say, a daily briefing or a chief's dashboard at that point. Right here, we're looking at a kind of a demo portion of a PII editor review, kind of meant for either command staff or any personnel that is tasked with taking on this effort of making sure that PII, that personal identifiable information, is stripped out of that data that is collected. But I wanted to make sure that it's also very much inherent to the data integrity as well. So this information that is flowing from the officer's submission using Survey123 is going directly into this web app builder. Again, that idea of that steel thread, keeping the information in that system of record of ArcGIS, that we're allowing for the person who is in charge of reviewing this information to have all the context necessary for the information that is being looked at that one specific stop, but not allowing for the data to be edited unless it is having PII inside of that, so that it can adhere to the DOJ standards. So again, really kind of pointing at that idea of the data integrity. We're making sure that the information that's collected by the officer in the field is not actually then updated and unless it has that PII information into it. So we're allowing for certain fields to be editable that could potentially house PII information. Again, officers are trained to not include that, but all of us being human is possibilities. We'll make sure that we have capabilities to edit that information here so that it is ready for submission to DOJ. The idea of using Survey123 is a one-to-many, so we're utilizing the idea that each one of these points is the stop itself, and then using a related table for the people that are at the stop and interviewed at that point. So this idea that when we're looking at this stop information, we have two different tables here that we can go look through. Again, the idea of the stops, giving specific context to what is happening at the stop. But moving to the secondary table here, the related table of the persons at the stop, allowing for us to then go through and review the brief description portions, which is really the portions of the survey that potentially has PII in it, allowing for that person who is tasked with this effort to go through, make sure there's no PII information within those different attribute fields here, but then to also make it easy enough for that individual to be able to filter through the different statuses that we see here, but also be able to then interact if that is then now deemed to be ready for submission. They can go ahead and just click around the area that was recently reviewed, select from pending, which is what is put as a status when an officer is submitting a survey from the field, and then get it ready for submission to DOJ, meaning that I have gone through this these locations, these submission points, and I have deemed that there is no PII in that those records, and I am now able to submit that information to DOJ without any issue. So I would just go ahead and hit save. That information then would just drop off the map due to our filtering capabilities. And then this is see as through Flourition that this map would then ultimately go on and on by removing those points as I changing that status from pending to ready to submit to DOJ. So this is actually, again, being able to have an ease of the information flowing directly from the field, that the officers are using the Survey123 and getting that information into an application that then is getting that information ready for submission to DOJ through this review process, ensuring that no PII is then included into that data sent to the California DOJ. And more importantly, portion of this potentially we're talking about here is allowing then that information to flow into an operations dashboard. Again, this could be any kind of imagination of a daily briefing dashboard or chief's dashboard, really just that ability to visualize the information that again is streaming in near real time from the field, from the officers' survey submissions, that is allowing for that visualization to have that pulse on the community, have that understanding of what's happening in and around the areas that the agency is policing, so that potential resources could be shifted or reallocated, but really have that pulse, have that information flow in here so that that data-driven policing can be then very much utilized and then put into play as necessary. So you have this interactional dashboard where you can really understand what is happening at a moment's notice and have that information aggregated to really, again, have that pulse on the community that is being served by that agency. So having that information in ArcGIS as your system of record for your RIPA collection really then opens up that idea of utilizing the different capabilities within that system of record to get it into multiple different types of applications that then just best serve how this RIPA collection effort is then done. Utilizing Survey123 as your collection portion in the field, letting that free flow into the other applications to additionally aid in efficiency of this RIPA initiative in itself. At this time, I'd like to just push it back over to John as he starts talking about our police transparency solution and how to best engage with our citizens in our community.
Thanks, Jason. So we just wanted to wrap up briefly before we go today by touching on the police transparency solution. Police transparency is free to download and install with your existing Esri licensing, and it can help your agency share not only RIPA data, but any authoritative information that you want to communicate with the public and community stakeholders. Police transparency is new, but it has its genesis in the work that we did with the Police Foundation and other stakeholders during the Obama administration, during the 21st Century Task Force on Policing and the Police Data Initiative. And what started as a means for police to share open data has now evolved into the full solution that is available now. So when you get police transparency, you get this fully baked community engagement hub. It gives you a bunch of tools, tools for sharing open data, sharing information about current crime conditions. You can share agency demographics and diversity data and any other key police and community data sets that you'd like to share, including RIPA data. It also enables citizen engagement with tools for connecting with community on evidence-based strategies. You can improve access to neighborhood policing officers, and you can also solicit feedback from the community, and you can share information about upcoming police activities and events. When you download Transparency, you get a configured 5-page website, and it includes the Police Transparency Hub welcome page that you see here, which can include messaging from your chief or sheriff, an overview of your agency's mission, and also any open data and social media links that you want to share. The next page is a community engagement page, and the community engagement page includes tools to find your neighborhood policing officer and report non-emergency quality of life issues to the agency. The next one is a workforce diversity page, and with workforce diversity, you can share dashboards that show the demographics of your department, and you can compare those demographics to the demographic makeup of the community that you serve. The next page is a crime statistics page, and on here you can publish current and historic crime maps and apps. It can be either in a public crime map or in a dashboard that can be manipulated, and you can look at crime statistics by time period, by your location, any way you want to slice and dice it. And finally, and importantly, it has a use of force page. So your agency can share when your officers use force, the type of force used, and any metrics about use of force, including demographics of individuals involved in use of force incidents. And each of these pages has resources, has space for your own resources, and all the text is configurable to your agency's messaging. All of the images are also configurable to your branding. It includes 16 apps now, but it's going to continue to grow. It has all the data schemas, layers, and maps already hooked up. You just need to hydrate with your own data. It's mobile device friendly. It includes an auto translate function, and we're going to share some resources. If you don't know how to get this yet, we'll share some resources at the end on how you can download Police Transparency at the end of the webinar. Okay, we've had a lot of questions coming in, and a lot of them revolve around what do you need to get started. There's a couple things you need. First, you need an ArcGIS account. It can either be an ArcGIS Online account or it can be an ArcGIS Enterprise account. And this is going to be where you build and host your RIPA surveys and dashboards. You also need a creator user type. So the creator user type is how you're going to create the app. and then share it out with your officers. And the last thing you're going to need is field worker named user types for each of your agency's officers. So if you're not sure if you already have any of this licensing or all of this licensing, feel free to follow up with either Jason or I after the webinar, and we can help you with these questions, connect you with your account manager, or we can answer them ourselves. One other caveat, so for export to the RIPA board format, you need ArcGIS Pro, which would be included in your ArcGIS account, and you need the interoperability extension to format it in the right format that DOJ needs. So once you have that, it can all be scheduled and automated with a Pro task. Okay, here are some next step resources. Berkeley PD has been kind enough to share their RIPA survey template with us. So you can, at this top link here, you can download, it'll take you to their hub site and you can download the template there. This can be used to populate your own survey with the standard RIPA questions mandated by the state. We also had some questions about adding your own questions, and you can also do that. If you want to add some of your own questions that are important to your agency, you can add those as Berkeley did. To learn more about Survey123, ArcGIS dashboards, and also the police transparency solution, we have several other links here, and you can screenshot this, or you can wait and we'll send you a resource page via email to all the attendees after the webinar. Okay, let's do some Q&A. I have a few questions, and I'm not sure if Amy might have some questions too, but I'll kick things off. A question came up, does the Survey123, and this is for Jason or Sgt Rago, does the Survey123 application collect the total amount of time that officers spend on reporting so that these numbers can be reported to the state?
I can jump in on that. This is Jason.
Jason.
Go ahead. Sarge, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, we actually, we did program into our survey. We basically tabulate when the officers start the survey and when they submit it, and then we have a column in there which calculates that amount of time. So that way departments can actually analyze, and if they need to report the time spent by all the officers doing these types of surveys.
And I guess a follow-up question is, what is the average amount of time your officers are spending on each survey?
That's a great question. So when we started doing our briefings training, right, I got all the officers rolling their eyes. Oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. We're going to be doing this. It actually went really, really smoothly. So the feedback I got was very positive. It takes anecdotally about 3 to 4 minutes for an officer to complete a survey. And from what I gather talking to most people, once they do a couple, the speed and usability of the survey, 1, 2, 3, it walks them right through it. And now they can do it between 2 to 3 minutes and hardly even hear feedback from anyone else having issues or problems. So between 2 to 3 minutes, I think is a very good standard for what our officers experience.
And is there any requirement? Do they do this during the stop, after the stop? How does that work?
They have the option to do it either or. We encourage them to do it at the location after the stop is over, only because we use location services to help populate the location. It speeds them through the survey a little faster. But if circumstances dictate they could do it later in their shift, they would just have to change the location to the location of the stop. But they do have the option to do either or, after the stop or in the shift. And
we talked a bit about the review process. Who does the review? And it sounds like it's not an automated process, that it's a manual process. Who does that? How often do you guys do it? And how long does that take them?
Yeah, so right now, it sort of falls in my realm. I have an IT analyst who works with me, and between the two of us, we conduct a PI review on a monthly basis. So after the previous month's data have all been submitted, we use sort of the first 2 weeks of the month to quality review all the previous month's data. It doesn't take that long. I mean, between 20 minutes maybe to do so. We get about 600 to 700 stops per month submitted by our officers. So it usually takes 30 minutes of sort of scrolling through, reading and reviewing. And after that, we will mark them as ready to be submitted to our open data portal.
And I assume that review, mostly you're just checking that free form field, right, for any PII data.
Exactly. Yeah, there's 2 free form fields that we need to make sure that there's no PII in.
Great. And you're not reporting to the state yet? Is that an annual report that you do?
Yes, it's required on an annual basis. We're actually in the testing stages right now. We're testing to the state's test site to make sure that the data is formatted correctly. And that's sort of an ongoing process with us. And we do plan to test or to submit to the DOJ at the end of the year for our data for 2021.
Great. And I'm assuming this that you don't have to duplicate data entry. Officers don't have to duplicate data entry into your RMS as well, right? This is only done on in the Survey123 app.
Correct. The only thing the officers do in our CAD application is they submit a disposition code indicating that they had RIPA stop. And what that allows us to do is sort of track the times where they should be submitting surveys, and we can compare that to the surveys actually submitted. So part of a quality assurance to make sure all surveys are submitted from the officers. But apart from that, they do the survey on their phone sometime after the stop.
Great. So let's turn it over to Amy. Amy, do you have any questions for either Sgt Rago or Jason?
Yeah, I have a question that's coming in for Sgt Rago. In regards to creating the survey, what was the process? Did you set it up with like IT, your analysts, officers, and then I guess this is more of a 2-part question. How was it rolling it out? Was it easy? Was it not? Did you get some negative feedback? Can you kind of briefly talk a little bit about implementing it, getting it going, and then kind of the process of when you rolled it out?
Yeah, so the technical portions of setting up were done by our IT department. I have a extremely capable and competent partner that I work with named Chuck Soper, and he's basically did the heavy lifting on the creation of the survey itself. I did most of the implementation and rollout. So the first thing we did was we trained a couple of our power users that we have in the field. We got feedback from them. We made some additional changes, and then we went to identifying our pilot group, and a group of officers provided them training on how to use it, when they were supposed to train it, and we just started having them use it. And as they did, they provided feedback. Most of the issues they had were just questions about when they should do it or how they should submit it. As far as using the Survey123 app itself, it was very straightforward and easy, and I think that was one of the positives that we had as far as using it as a solution is it's very easy to use. And so the feedback after they've all got the training, like I mentioned before, has been very good. Most issues that officers have to do with maybe they got signed out and they just need to sign back in. And once we got them through that, they're just able to go through and submit the information as they need to.
Awesome, thank you. That's all I have right now, John.
Okay, thanks, Amy. I think we're going to end a bit early today. Let me give you a couple more slides. So if you have questions for any of us, here is our contact information, including Sgt Rago, myself, Jason, and Amy. If you have any questions about anything we showed today, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We're happy to help. Thank you for joining us today, Sgt Rago. And thank you, Amy Varela. Thanks for joining us, the audience out there, and we'll see you in our next Esri Law Enforcement webinar. Thank you.